A long-haul truck driver named Devon Williams pulled his gigantic refrigerated semi-truck into a truck stop in a city called Kingman, Arizona. After putting his truck in park, Devon reached over and grabbed his sleeping bag off the passenger seat and began to unroll it. If he didn't sleep this night, then he would have to take another break later on this route. Devon began doing the math in his head. If he stopped a little while later to take another sleep break, would he still be able to cover those 1,300 miles by Monday? And he just wasn't sure. And after an hour of Devon getting angrier and so not sleeping at all, he finally just gave up on sleep, and then he called his boss and he told him that he had just made a stop in order to sleep, but he couldn't, and so he was just going to hit the road again. But don't worry, I will be in Kansas City on Monday morning with this delivery on time. Devon's boss was a guy named Tom Wilson, and he didn't find anything unusual about this phone call he got from Devon. And so that night, Tom was not worried at all that Devon would not make it to Kansas City by Monday morning. Devon was like one of his most reliable guys, and so if Devon said he was going to be there on Monday morning, then he would be there on Monday morning. But on Monday morning, the distribution center in Kansas City, Missouri, called Tom Wilson and they said, "Hey, your driver's not here yet. What's going on?" Tom couldn't just call Devon and ask where he was and what was going on, because this was back in 1995. They didn't have cell phones. And so all day Monday, Tom sat at his desk waiting for a call from Devon. And when he didn't get a call from Devon, Tom began calling his other drivers all over the country, asking them if maybe they had had some sort of interaction with Devon and knew where he was and why he had not made it. But none of the drivers had any idea what was going on with Devon. Then that evening, Tom got a call, but it was not from Devon. It was from Devon's wife, Mary Lou, and she was calling to say, "Where's Devon?" Tom suddenly thought, okay, we have a real problem here. Mary Lou panicked and immediately called the police. They explained to Mary Lou that what they would do is put out an alert to all the different police departments that fell kind of roughly along the route that Devon's truck had been on, and see if any of them had had some sort of interaction with Devon. Very likely, one of these police departments would know where Devon was. And sure enough, after this alert went out, the officer got a call back very quickly from a sheriff's department in a place called Coconino County, Arizona. The sheriff's department in Coconino County made it very clear to the police officer in Americus, Kansas, that they had no idea where Devon was, but they definitely knew where his truck was. Basically, everybody in Coconino County knew where Devon's truck was. It was all anybody in that county was talking about. Because on Sunday, so the day before Devon was reported missing, somebody driving Devon's truck spent the entire day terrorizing hikers and campers inside of the Tonto National Forest in Coconino County. The Tonto National Forest was nowhere near Devon's trucking route. In fact, it wasn't near any trucking route ever. And the roads in the forest are barely wide enough to support small cars going through, let alone a 48-foot long, massive 10-ton semi-truck. But on Sunday morning, two hikers named Lynn and Jack Yarrington were in their tent inside of Tonto National Forest, and suddenly they began to hear a rumbling sound coming from one end of this road. All they saw on the road coming in their direction was this huge cloud of dust and smoke, and then through the dust and smoke came Devon's humongous truck blazing down this road at practically full speed. And after Devon's truck whizzed past them and blazed off in the other direction out of sight, and sure enough, a couple of minutes later, they heard a rumbling sound and they saw another cloud of dust, and it was Devon's truck now coming back in the other direction on this same dirt road. And so Jack and Lynn, they kind of backed up behind their tent, and they watched as this truck blazed past them again, flying out the other direction. This driver has likely gotten lost. They've managed to turn around, and now they're heading back out to the highway, and that's all this was. And then all of a sudden, as they're kind of chatting about it and laughing about it, they hear the sound of the truck coming back again. Except this time, Jack and Lynn, they looked where Devon's truck was going, and they saw there was a small sedan coming up the road in the opposite direction. This road was actually on a turn, and so both drivers are driving towards each other without realizing it. And so Jack and Lynn, they jump up, they begin screaming and yelling at the driver of the truck to slow down, but the truck didn't slow down. It just continued coming down the road, and the sedan driver, he saw Jack and Lynn flailing their arms and trying to get somebody to stop on the road. The truck, which had not slowed down at all, even though the driver could have clearly seen the sedan, just whizzed right past the sedan and would have smashed into it if the sedan had not jumped off the road. The driver of the sedan got out of the car, and when Jack and Lynn ran up to him to make sure he was okay, he would tell them that he got a good look at the driver of the truck as he drove past him, and he told them that the driver was just gripping the wheel, looking totally straight ahead, no expression whatsoever, just barreling past him. It was like he didn't even look at the sedan. He was just going. A little later that day, and not far from where this incident had just happened on this road with Jack and Lynn and this sedan, there was this family that was hiking through Tonto National Forest, and they had arrived at this big, beautiful open field in the middle of the forest, and they planned to have a picnic in this field. But as they came out of the tree line and walked into this beautiful open high grass meadow area, they looked out and they saw just kind of in the middle of the field was this huge truck that made no sense. How in the world could this truck have gotten to this meadow? They didn't know. The father of the family, he saw there was a man standing next to this truck, just kind of looking away from them off at the mountains in the distance. And so this family kind of assumed that the driver of this truck had somehow gotten into this meadow and maybe their truck was stuck, and so now they need help. And so the father told his family to stay put for a second, and then he, on his own, walked across the meadow towards this truck. And as the father got closer, he did see that very clearly the truck was stuck in the mud. And so this driver very likely is stranded. And so as he got close enough, the father yelled out to this guy and said, "Hey, do you need some help? We can go back and call someone, what can we do for you?" But the man who was standing outside of the truck didn't even turn around to talk to this father. He just kept standing there motionless, looking off into the distance. And so the father made it about 5 or 6 feet away from this guy, and the father just stopped and very clearly said, "Hey, I'm talking to you. Do you need help?" And at this point, the man who was standing next to the truck, he turned around and he looked at the father. And immediately the father kind of backed up for a second because there was something off about this guy. The guy was just kind of standing there and he was staring at the father, and he opened his mouth like he was about to speak. But instead of speaking, he just kept opening his mouth wider and wider until it was as wide as he could get it. And then he began wiggling his lower jaw back and forth as fast as he could, and then clicking his teeth simultaneously. And so the father just began backing up like there was something wrong with this guy. And right as the father was about to just turn around and leave and go protect his family from this guy, the guy stopped with his mouth, and then he just stared directly at the father and said very calmly, "I didn't do it. They did it." Now, when the father heard this, he was already so weirded out by this guy that he didn't even have any questions to follow up with. Instead, he just turned and began running back towards his family. The family, they ran back to their car, they drove back home, and they called the police about this guy and his truck. And when the deputy got there, they walked out into this meadow, and sure enough, just like the father had said, there was the truck stuck in the mud. And so the deputy began walking out to the truck, expecting to see the driver, this guy who the father had said was acting totally weird. But when the deputy got up there, he found the truck was totally abandoned. There was nobody in the cab, there was nobody nearby, it was just sitting here, but it was still running. And so the deputy tried to open up the cab, but it was locked. He did look inside, and everything looked very neat and orderly. And then he went around to the back of the truck, and he opened up the back doors, and he found the refrigeration unit was still on, and inside of this truck was lots and lots of strawberries and lettuce. So the deputy really didn't know what to make of this truck in the middle of the field, combined with this report that the father gave about this guy who was standing near it, acting totally weird. And so he just checked the license plate of the truck, and he ran it against his database to see if there were any matching reports of missing trucks or missing truck drivers. but there weren't any. Because remember, this is on Sunday this is happening, and it wasn't until the next day, Monday, that Devon was reported missing, and his truck was added to a list of missing trucks and missing truck drivers. And so the Coconino County deputy just called a towing company who came out and hauled Devon's truck out of the forest. And then 24 hours later, when Devon was reported missing, the Coconino County Sheriff's Department put it all together and contacted the officer in Americus, Kansas to say, okay, we do have Devon's truck, but we don't have any other answers for you. Both Lynn and Jack Yarrington and the other people who saw this truck flying through the forest on that Sunday, they all insisted that the man they saw in the cab driving this truck matched the picture of Devon Williams. Police mounted a massive search inside of Tonto National Forest, and during the search, the couple, Jack and Lynn Yarrington, they would tell searchers that they actually thought they saw Devon Williams, not in his truck, but out on foot, walking around on Monday morning, so just hours before he would have been reported missing. They said they just saw this guy wandering barefoot down the road as they were driving out of the forest, and they slowed down to ask him if he was okay, and this guy, who looked exactly like Devon Williams, responded by picking up a rock and throwing it at their car. And so Jack and Lynn just drove past him, not realizing that this was the guy who very likely was driving that truck. But despite this huge search, they could not find Devon. There was absolutely no trace of him. And so after nearly 3 weeks of searching and not finding Devon, the police called off the search. Then on May 2nd, 1997, so almost exactly 2 years from when Devon had been reported missing, 2 hikers were walking on this trail in the middle of Tonto National Forest, right in the area where police had extensively searched for Devon 2 years earlier. These 2 hikers, they're walking on this trail, and up ahead they see there's this white thing right in the middle of the trail, just kind of sitting out. This white thing is a perfectly intact human skull. And they're thinking, how in the world did it get here? Why hasn't anybody else seen this and taken it? Like, how are we the first ones to see this? And so they would end up calling the police. The police would come out, they'd gather up the skull, it would be sent in for testing, and sure enough, DNA testing would reveal the skull belonged to Devon Williams. No one has ever been able to explain what actually happened to Devon Williams. And as crazy as that sounds, still to this day, no one has any idea what happened to him.